Everybody. Welcome to mini lecture 1.2. So today we are going to go into a bit more detail on the field of international entrepreneurship, and we're going to examine the international new venture. We are also going to discuss the impact of innovation within and across borders, the role of innovation in the international new venture, and examine some traditional international business theories and tools. So, recalling the two pieces of our entrepreneurship puzzle, action and innovation, and our conceptualization of entrepreneurship as the practice of creating and capturing value through innovative behavior, various types of entrepreneurship research has emerged to examine the specific nuances that are involved with creating these different types of value. Now, we spoke about some of these variations in entrepreneurship before, all of which have innovation as a fundamental tenet of their value creating activities. But today, we're going to be focusing on international entrepreneurship and the role of innovation in discovering and exploiting opportunities across national borders. Globalization. So, as the world begins to globalize and countries become less and less disparate, there is significant debate surrounding the place of new firms in this new world order. Now, globalization has a couple different definitions, but a consensus among all of them is that it refers to the interdependence and general interconnectedness of economies around the world, including increased movement of people, goods, and services across national borders. Now, this reduction in the barriers to trade has raised some significant questions regarding the role of international companies and international institutions. Now, the field of international entrepreneurship emerged as a response to these questions. So if we recall the insights from John Stuart Mill and Joseph Schumpeter, which place entrepreneurship as vital drivers of a nation's economy, we can see that international entrepreneurship combines principles from entrepreneurship and from international business to address the role of innovation in navigating the complexities of business operations across cultures. So, the international new venture is a focal point of the international entrepreneurship discipline. And there's particular interest in the ways in which the international new venture is able to gain a competitive advantage given its border crossing orientation. Now, the international new venture can be designed as a venture that is born with an eye for entering a foreign market or foreign markets at its inception. Now, we can identify an international new venture as those that receive 25 to 30% of their total revenue from foreign operations within 6 years of its inception. And there are four key elements which distinguish the international new venture as a particularly unique kind of multinational enterprise. So the first refers to the ways in which their transactions are internalized through its internal hierarchical structure. So what does this mean? What do I mean by that? Well, the notion of internalizing one's costs or an organization's costs is not exclusive to the international new venture. In fact, all organizations tend to form where economic transactions are inefficiently governed by market practices. So what does that mean? So basically where there are market imperfections is where we see the formation of new organizations. However, when the transaction cost of developing a contract, for example, to execute the contract and then to monitor the performance of the contract is at its lowest within an organization, the international new venture's hierarchical authority will be the mechanism of governance rather than the market prices or a hybrid contract. Again, what does that mean? So as an example, let's say you're a clothing manufacturing company and you manufacture your clothing in various locations. If you source raw materials from different suppliers, you would rely on market transactions or contracts between you and the supplier to procure the various components that you need. Now, instead of relying on these external elements, you might decide to establish your own division or a subsidiary for producing the necessary components in-house. And by doing so, you will have created a hierarchical structure of governance whereby the division or the subsidiary, the in-house bit, operates under your company. Now, this would provide an element of direct control over the quality standards or enhanced coordination to achieve greater efficiencies. And from an innovation perspective, the higher initial investment may outweigh the drawbacks or the risks associated with external suppliers within your supply chain. Now, the second element refers to the alternative governance structures by which the international new venture manages its key resources. So, due to the relatively universal challenge of resource scarcity, the new venture tends to own a smaller percentage of the resources that it actually needs to survive in comparison to more mature organizations. So, the entrepreneurs have to find innovative ways for controlling their assets. For example, networks that are based on informal social control through, for example, trust and moral obligation can actually ensure greater resource conservation compared to formal contracts because of the cooperation that's based on personal reputation. So the international entrepreneur and the international new venture actually have a higher tolerance for these kind of alternative governance mechanisms than, for example, an existing multinational enterprise. Now, the third element is based on the competitive advantage that the firm actually receives by their choice of foreign location. So the international new venture derives some competitive advantage, some advantage over their competition by moving some resource, whether that's some knowledge or some raw material, moving that to a location where it could potentially be combined with a less mobile resource, like a particular demographic or a market. So in many instances, private knowledge is a key tool in the international entrepreneur's arsenal for choosing a particular location and therefore overcoming local challenges such as local laws, languages, and business practices. So when an international new venture introduces innovative goods or services, it can actually signal their expert knowledge within this new market. Now, the fourth element refers to the uniqueness of their resources. So like all firms, sustainability, viability requires a uniqueness of their resources to maintain this competitive advantage. Now, generally speaking, the international new venture has to limit the use of its proprietary knowledge by outsiders in order to remain commercially viable. So as you've probably figured out by the previous elements, the knowledge that international entrepreneurs enact through the international new venture is key to their success and ability to internationalize from the onset. So we can see that the international new venture is strongly contingent on the entrepreneur. And while the individual entrepreneur or entrepreneurs are vital for their ventures beyond internationalizing the new venture, it is the unique knowledge of the context-specific complexities of operating across borders which allow them to internationalize from inception. And that's what distinguishes the international entrepreneur's role in the international new venture compared to an entrepreneur operating in a more domestic venture. So in many cases, international entrepreneurs build their international kind of relationships and their know-how during studies abroad or through international work experience. So touching back to point 2 on the previous slide, research has actually found that networks and the strength of one's networks actually serve to facilitate internationalization and limit opportunism by their competitors. Come on, there we go. Come on. I can't see what you guys see, so hopefully it's changed. So hopefully onto our international business theories. So we are going to go over 7. This is not an exhaustive list, but I do think it's a nice toolkit to understand the whys and the hows behind businesses' internationalization. And what I mean by whys and hows is there's going to be 4 of these theories that are tools for examining the ways in which a company goes about internationalizing, so the how. And then there's going to be 3 that examine the rationale behind internationalizing, so the why would we do that? So the first, as we can see here, is transaction cost theory. Hopefully you can see it here. Now this actually straddles both the how and the why because it examines why a company might choose a certain type of international orientation. For example, if they want to operate as a joint venture or not. And it examines how the multinational enterprise, the multinational organization, minimizes their costs based on the knowledge assets that's held by them, by that organization. So you can see here that we have a matrix where the multinational enterprise's knowledge assets are on the x-axis and complementary assets that are held by some local organization is on the y-axis. Now, the decision of partnership structure is contingent on the ease of transferring that knowledge. So, for example, if both the local company and the multinational enterprise have knowledge that's difficult to transact, then the most sensible and cost-effective method of internationalizing is a joint venture between the two organizations. On the flip side, on the top left, if both sides have knowledge that is easily transferable, then there's really no clear cost-effective method regarding which organization owns which assets, so it's indeterminate. Now, in the case that the knowledge assets of the multinational enterprise are easy to transfer, while the local companies is difficult to transfer, then the local firm maintains leadership of the operations in the new market. And the opposite is the case if it's the local organization's assets which are easy to transfer. So next we have, hopefully, Vernon's international product lifecycle. Now, this falls within the Y, and this represents a relation between the profit margin and the life cycle of a product. Now we can see that the maturity stage is where we reach a drop off in the per unit profit margin, so the profit per product sold. And we can also see that this corresponds to an oversaturation of the market. Now it's at this juncture, sorry, there's a fly. So it's at this juncture that an organization might seek out moving into new markets that are not so saturated, thereby recapturing a higher per unit profit margin. So next we have monopolistic advantage theory. Now this falls within the Y, and this theory suggests that a firm that chooses to break into a new market does so because there is something new about them that give them a market leading advantage. Now, remember that a monopoly refers to a market structure where there is only one seller and no close substitutes. So the monopolistic advantage theory posits that an organization will internationalize because they are able to capture the market in a similar way that a monopoly will. Now, consider the fourth element of the international new venture that we spoke about on a couple slides ago regarding the uniqueness of their resources. So the next theory is the oligopolistic reaction theory, and this also falls within the Y of internationalization. So sometimes this is known as follow the leader. This theory suggests that a multinational enterprise is incentivized to... Oh, I hope you've been able to hear me this whole time. So the next theory... The next theory is the oligopolistic reaction theory, and this also falls within the Y of internationalization. Sometimes also known as follow the leader, this theory suggests that a multinational enterprise is incentivized to enter new markets in response to their direct competitors' behavior. A good example, let's say you're McDonald's and I'm Burger King. Now, I decide to open up locations internationally, wherever it might be, wherever I might not already be located. As my direct competition, there is rationale, so there's a logical reason for you to break into the same market to limit my ability to fully capture the market. So next we have the OLI paradigm. Now the OLI paradigm falls into the how of internationalization because the OLI paradigm is a tool for examining which elements might determine the way a company opts to internationalize by identifying external and internal elements that induce change. That is internal versus external to the organization itself. Now, these elements are broken down into ownership, so how much control the organization might have over something. For example, investment in research and development would be an internally induced change where there is internal ownership, while increasing competition or changing technological tastes would be an externally induced change where the company has no ownership. It's also broken down into location. So for example, what about the location has internal versus external effects? For example, links or access to key suppliers is an internally induced change as it can incentivize a locational change.
whereas undesirable policies in a certain market is an external change, which might encourage a change in location. It's also broken down into I internationalization. For example, if the organization has created new forms of contracting, let's say licensing, that is an internal process of the organization, whereas transportation and communication changes may be external to the company and facilitate foreign direct investment rather than licensing. Now, remember that foreign direct investment refers to a situation where an organization establishes ownership or managerial control of an enterprise in an international market, such as opening new production plants in a foreign market, which provides direct access to the local market, whereas licensing has indirect access through local partners. So next, hopefully it changed. Next, we have the Uppsala model. Now, the Uppsala model also falls within the how of internationalization, and the Uppsala model positions internationalization as a relatively slow and evolutionary process, and it really emphasizes this notion of psychic distance. Now, psychic distance refers to the perceived distance, so the perceived differences between a company's home country and a foreign market. For example, language differences, cultural disparities, educational differences, differences in the political systems, and just general business practices fall within this notion of psychic distance. Now, the model suggests that companies tend to internationalize gradually, starting with countries that have a lower psychic distance from their home country. And as the organization gains experience, they may expand to markets with greater psychic distance and then affirm their commitment to foreign markets as they learn and as they develop more networks. So, that brings us to the end of mini lecture 1.2. Be on the lookout for mini lecture 1.3, and I look forward to seeing you in class. As always, if anyone has any questions, you have my email on the Moodle page, so do not hesitate to send me a email. All right, take care.